When I receive praise about the success of the organization, I often say that my greatest accomplishment is in hiring great people. And I don't say that to deflect. I say that because one person can't do it all.
Welcome to Psychology. Today, we are joined by Elise Dowell, the CEO of JCC of Mid-Westchester, an organization that enriches the lives of over 20,000 patrons with educational, social, and cultural activities. Under Elise's leadership, the JCC is thriving. They've doubled their operating income in the last 2 years, proving that doing good and doing well go hand in hand. I'm excited to learn more about the organization that Elise runs. Elise, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm curious, when you think about your staff, of which many I think have been there for a very long time, can you talk about what you do on a regular basis to ensure that they feel a genuine sense of belonging?
We are lucky. We have people that have been with us for, 40 plus years, both staff and, community members. We actually have a dance class in our dance school of women who have been dancing together, I kid you not, together for over 40 years. So it's really amazing. And we just honored at one of our recent benefits a teacher who had been teaching for, it was her 40th anniversary. Maybe we have a thing with 40, I don't know. So we do have a lot of longtime members of the community, and we have, many people who have recently joined the JCC, both in terms of staff and, in terms of membership. So I really do think that diversity, both in terms of longevity of participation, as well as lots of other diversity, is really quite unusual. And I'll give you a staff example. One of the things that we really try to emphasize is this sense of belonging. We are an organization that is based on Jewish values, and to us that translates into opening our doors widely for everybody. So on the staff side, each week we hold a staff meeting that includes sort of the manager level professionals and upper management. And we start each meeting by what we call Story of the Week. And it's sort of an open forum, and everybody has a chance to raise their hand, share a story. We have some really amazing stories that come through, somebody they interacted with. Sometimes it's people in their personal lives meeting somebody who has a connection to the JC, and it really serves to remind people what it is that we do and why we do it. And hearing the diversity of these stories and experiences, and we probably get 1 or 2 a week. It's not like we sit there for an hour doing this. It's a 5-minute exercise, but it really gives people a reminder of why their work is important and how much we value their participation in the community and on the team.
Well, there's a lot to be said for storytelling and giving everyone a voice, right? So I'm curious, when we talk about your career prior to the JCC, you've been in the corporate world and in the nonprofit world. What do you see as the key differences in how nonprofit focuses on growth compared to how profit businesses focus on growth?
Obviously, the main goal in the corporate sector is to generate profits for shareholders, and the primary goal of a nonprofit is to serve a specific mission or public good. So there are different goals here, but ensuring financial prudence and running a financially sound profit is obviously critical. But even if the overall objective is different, and as you had mentioned when we started, we're really fortunate to have experienced some significant growth over the past few years. The budget, the revenues doubling. As important, more important, is the fact that we're serving about 25,000 people now, up from even just a few years ago when we were serving about 15,000 people. So we are really in an extraordinary moment as an organization. But to be honest, I think that even with the end result, end goal being different, I do think the key strategic imperative is very similar between the two types of organizations. You listen to your consumer, you assess need and demand, you learned how to connect with your audience to ensure they know about your offerings, and you provide a quality product. So I do think that sort of that underlying basis is similar, regardless of whether you're working in the for-profit or nonprofit sector.
Well, that makes sense. And quite honestly, your set of offerings are incredibly diverse. Your facility is a pretty amazing facility, so unmatched by many out there. So I'm curious, pivoting a little bit, can you recall a time when strong culture directly helped an organization overcome challenges or crises, which I feel like we're facing every day right around now?
So I can. I think, maybe this goes without saying, I don't know. October 7th was obviously a really difficult moment, ongoing period for the Jewish community, and being a Jewish institution, at that time, at this time, was really um, a challenge, being a part of this conversation and addressing, the issues that arose at that moment and that have continued ever since. I do think that we are very fortunate to have built up an infrastructure as an organization, built up a culture and a reputation as being an organization that could provide critical resources to the community before that happened, in order to pivot at that time to expand our offerings to address that moment and to rise to those challenges, whether that was, a culture of prioritizing security, which was something that we had done prior to October 7th, that we saw as sort of a critical component of our work, and being able to then leverage that infrastructure and experience to expand our security considerations, whether that was developing Jewish programs, something we had done a few years prior and were then able to pivot to the needs of the day. I really do think October 7th was a difficult moment, but the culture that we have developed at the JCC, and the culture of and the reputation that we have built, that we had, that 70-year-old organization. So we have a longstanding history of good work in the community, but I think that what we had done in those years prior really allowed us to expand and support the community at that time, and, up until this point as well.
So related to that, given the long history of the JCC, and by the way, as a nearly 50-year-old, I remember going there as a child.
I hear this a lot. I do.
You do. But I'm curious, what are the most valuable lessons you've learned about fostering loyalty and engagement over the long haul, especially as things change over time?
So yes, I do. I love the stories, and we, started doing this community survey every year to just get feedback from the community. And one of the things that we always ask is, tell us about your story. Tell us about your experience. And there are many times that we hear, well, I took my child to learn how to swim in your pool, and now I'm taking my grandchildren to learn how to swim in your pool. And so this intergenerational experience is not new, and it's one of my favorite things. So, fostering loyalty and engagement over the long haul. One of my favorite professors in business school is someone named Michael Feiner, and he wrote The Finer Points of Leadership. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but I am a big fan. And, 20 plus years later, I still reference his laws of leadership, and I will reference one relative to this question. So he talks about the law of personal commitment. And I think this translates into lots of different ways, both for the community that you serve, as well as ensuring that you have a strong employee base that really supports those programs that you offer to the community. And what his law of personal commitment talks about is understanding your colleagues as both people inside and outside of the organization, and understanding that employees and colleagues will really commit to a supervisor if that supervisor demonstrates commitment to them. I think about these sort of approaches often because I think they just resonate in meaningful ways. And I can, give you an example that recently happened that made me think about this in and of itself. So we have this longtime staffer who looked upset one day a number of months ago, and I walked by and I asked if everything was okay. And it turned out his wife was undergoing chemotherapy treatments and was having a particularly hard week, something that I hadn't known, but he shared with me. So each time I subsequently saw him, I would check in to see how she was doing, and, not to overstep, but just to let him know that his wife was on my mind. A couple months later, he, enthusiastically waved me over because he wanted to share with me that the treatment was completed and his wife had a clean bill of health. And he said that he had been so looking forward to telling me and was so grateful for my concern over the past few months. And to me, relationships and commitment are meaningful regardless of what moment an organization may be in crisis or otherwise, but certainly surrounding yourself with people that do feel commitment and do feel that loyalty and do feel seen and recognized. You know that people are going to step up because they have felt that you've stepped up for them.
Yeah, I love that story. Not obviously for what he went through, but certainly how you handled it as a leader. And I think sometimes not sometimes, it's always critical to show that level of empathy and care, because when someone feels cared for, they certainly give back and they feel a level of belonging and commitment to an organization. So,
It's
case in
true.
point.
And especially, I would say especially in a nonprofit organization, I do have to believe that, not that people don't want to be seen and cared for elsewhere, but there are different drivers to wanting to work at a nonprofit organization. You're not going to become a millionaire working at a nonprofit organization. So there are other factors. And one of the factors, I believe, is feeling cared for and feeling seen. And I do think that that helps foster loyalty and commitment from a staff.
I hear to that. One of the things we see in the corporate world, and I would be really curious if you see similar things or experience similar things in the nonprofit world, is the organizations that are really encouraging innovation and creativity and out of the box thinking are the ones that are leapfrogging their competitors, and doing really interesting things as a result. I'm curious where you've seen that maybe the case at JCC, and if you can identify maybe a story or two where you've seen that come to life.
So, when I started in early 22, we were still sort of in this COVID-ish era. We weren't even fully open at the time. We still had, certain elements of what we were doing that was, we had still closed down. So in some ways it was an opportunity for a reset. And I said to the team and, the team that we have built over time, that I had a reasonable bandwidth for failure, because we are never going to know if something is going to work and is going to resonate until we try it. And obviously, with a nonprofit, you want to be really careful about what it is that you try and what dollars you expend in this innovation. But in order to grow and in order to change and evolve, you have to be willing to try new and different things. So, I said it, and then I supported it with actually having that bandwidth. And we had some tremendous successes and some things that didn't work at all. And that was a tremendous learning, and was given the equivalent amount of praise for trying as were the successes, because sort of the blank slate that we had really gave us that opportunity. A story that I will say is slightly different in nature, but I still think is relevant to the conversation. I have this amazing colleague who I'll mention by name. Her name is Claire Hoffman. She's our Chief Development Officer. And she started a few months after I did. And she was going through some of our files and realized that we had a grant from maybe 5 or 6 years prior, maybe even a little bit longer, that had not been completed, or actually hadn't even been started, but certainly hadn't been completed. And it was a government grant. And from that point, we sort of did a little bit more research, and we realized that we really hadn't seen many additional grants from that point. And we recognized the fact that, it's a matter of credibility. You need to do what you say you're going to do. And we hadn't been in a position at that time, for COVID reasons and otherwise, to complete it. And she came up with a way to get this grant reinstated, get this grant completed with tremendous success, and be able to showcase the fact that we are a legitimate organization, that she said we need to be able to demonstrate credibility in order to continue to prove to the community that we are worthy. So she did, and we completed it. And it was a pretty heavy lift to be able to do that. But her creativity and innovation in getting that approval, getting this, it was a fairly significant infrastructure grant completed, has translated into an incredible relationship with our elected officials who are supporting us with major funding opportunities to invest in the infrastructure of our building, to our programming, to, security investments, because we were able to be innovative with something that hadn't historically had as much success. She was able to turn it around, and as a result, we are thriving in this area. Not exactly the question that you were asking, maybe, but something that I think about often when you need to get creative and figure out a way to do something, and when you do it well, or perhaps in an unexpected way, you can really see tremendous outcomes and results.
No, I think it's actually a great example. At the end of the day, organizations that do the same thing every day and expect different results are, not going to be very satisfied with what they see, right? Just like people as well,
Right,
right?
right, right. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the
Right,
same
right.
thing
Doing
and
the same
expecting.
thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You talk a little bit about the difference of those who might work in a nonprofit versus a corporate setting. How do you foster engagement and a sense of purpose among those in the organizations who may not be paid staff, such as volunteers, or might be paid less, but maybe have a different point of view? Can you talk about your approach there?
Sure. Um, I am so fortunate to work alongside a board of directors with an extraordinary board chair, Rachel Mosley. I will just call her out because she is just so amazing. Who really strongly believe in the vision of the JCC and the critical role that we play in the community. So from a starting point, I know how lucky I am. For me, somebody with a background in PR and marketing, I also believe in the power of communications as a tool to keep our board, donors, volunteers, this whole cohort of people really engaged. I send out updates with some regularity, maybe a handful of times each year between board meetings, so that our board members can stay really involved and not have to wait until those meetings to hear all the updates. And they're able to take pride in both our successes and, understand what our challenges are. And I had one board member tell me that she devours those updates like they're a gossip column, one paragraph more exciting than the next. So I will really take that as a win. And that's not, how I envisioned them when I wrote them. But, the fact that she enjoys them that much, I am grateful. So I do think using the power of communication with a cohort of people, such as volunteers or board members or donors, can be a really effective tool.
That makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like you're writing like page 6.
At the page 6 of the JCC, I don't know, maybe.
Right. Let's dig in a little bit deeper. You talk about your marketing background. I'm curious, beyond the example you just gave, how else are you leveraging that in your setting to cultivate a strong culture and a sense of shared purpose and to build an overall great organization?
So I care a lot about communications and marketing because I do think that you can do amazing work, but if nobody knows about it, then, it's challenging. So we have invested in a marketing team that really pushes out, programs and, make sure that, when relevant, we have the appropriate press coverage. When we are, involved in, efforts with partners, we make sure that the communication is at a certain quality level, that the sort of overall image, both visually in terms of messaging, in terms of content, is consistent so that people understand what it is that they're going to get when they participate with our programs. We have been asked, we're, flattered to have been asked to serve, in an advisory capacity for other organizations to see what we're doing and how we're doing it. Because even through the investment in this work, we're still a nonprofit and we do things on, limited budgets, and we try and maximize every dollar that we spend. So it's been flattering to be seen as an organization that is doing this well, and understanding again that people need to know about the programs that are being offered, and what it is that you're doing in order to know that they want to participate.
That's a great answer, and it's a good example of where certainly marketing and communications and just reaching people on a human level is critical in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I'll go so far as to say one other thing. We're in such a digital age right now where everybody assumes that everything that we should be doing is in a digital format. But remember that we have, a diversity of participants from 6 weeks old to, well into, people's 90s that participate with us. And we also understand that people digest information differently. So we have gone back to printed materials, and because not everybody is a digital person necessarily, and not everybody gets their content from social media and or a website. We did this test a couple of years back of providing printouts of flyers of different programs, and we assessed, are people picking them up? Is it a waste of money? And we realized that it is yet one more tool that we should be using, even though it feels dated in some ways. We have so many people walking through our doors that just having some of these printed out flyers can be a tool that a whole cohort of people might appreciate, and they have.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also think, going back to earlier in our conversation, the one-on-one interactions that you have as an executive of the organization with patrons, participants, community members, that probably goes even further than any email or any print piece you could possibly get, right? It's a human connection that is
Totally
priceless.
a human connection. We have this one older patron who started coming to the JCC maybe 2 years ago, and he loved it so much that there is now a daily check-in. He walks in, he doesn't even know what it is that he's coming for, because he walks up to the front desk and says, "What's on tap for today?" And he just knows that he has a relationship with, team. They tell him, this is what you should do in the morning. This is what you should do, at 11, at 1. And then, he generally leaves by about 3:30, but he spends the day with us. And it's because he has trust in this relationship with members of the team that he's able to participate in a really meaningful way. So yes, it is the human connection that can go far.
And how critical that is for someone of that age, right? At the end of the day, he's probably keeping himself young and keeping himself intellectually curious and physically fit, or whatever he's doing.
He's doing all the things, but yes, it is true. And it's really, it's amazing to see.
So, related to that, I'm curious if you were to identify the most critical thing that a community-based organization can do to build a brand that people want to stick with, especially in a day and age where people are not paying attention to emails. People are paying attention to their wallets or the 45 other priorities that they have. What do you do to stick out and to stick in with their lives?
It's a good question. I think it goes back to your question about, to some degree, about the difference between for-profits and nonprofits in the strategic thinking about what it is that we offer. We really solicit feedback from the community, and it's very important. We have an increasing number of people that participate in our community survey once they realize that we actually listen and adjust and recalibrate programming in response to what it is that people are asking for. And it really varies. We're willing to try lots of different things. I'll give you an example. One of the questions that we have put out to the community is, what is your passion project? What are the things that you like doing that perhaps you might like to share with others? And we got a great response, and that has translated into members of our community leading different classes and groups and the things that they care about the most. And trust me, there is a varied spectrum of what those offerings are. And now they have just created for themselves and for this topic that they're so interested in, a whole cohort of people that they're going to be able to experience this with. So I really do think that being adaptable to the needs of the community, and we have a unique sort of role in the community to be able to do that, and then following through and creating content around what people are saying that they want is really interesting and positions us in a way that allows us to have a community that wants to stick with us. Because, the example that you mentioned earlier of, remembering from 50 years ago, your experiences, we hear that a lot and people want to come back. This is a place that people care about in the community. They want to see the JCC succeed. So their participation, even if it just means running a class, feels like they're doing that. So I think the adaptability and being able to be innovative in response to the community need is really key in that part of the conversation.
I also think, probably going back to your marketing background, they say the best type of communications is actually listening, right? And it sounds like you're doing just that. You're listening to the community to make sure that it is fitting their needs and their expectations, right?
And I will, go back to say also what we were talking about earlier, the, conversation around October 7th and what programming the community needs and wants right now. That's probably a little bit different even than what it was, before that, terrible day, and being able to adapt in this content area with, bringing people into a place that's safe and welcoming, and where people that want to express their Judaism culturally or otherwise, and can do so here, I think has allowed us to even further emphasize the point that we are a place that people want to be and need to be in this moment.
That makes sense. That makes sense. My final question for you, as a now veteran in this space, a leader in this space, what's your best advice for a new leader who's entering the nonprofit space, who wants to build a culture that not only delivers on its mission, but also retains its people internally, its people externally that you're trying to bring internal? What do you think is key?
So I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this management concept called building a cathedral. It's sort of this sort of visionary long-term approach that focuses on purpose rather than on short-term tasks like laying the bricks. So you're building something big, and you focus on that part of the vision versus whatever the task may be of the day. And I think that with a nonprofit organization, especially one that, employs many people with different types of roles, remembering how to recognize the importance of laying those bricks each day for the greater good keeps people motivated. And sometimes we all have, not so glamorous moments during our day, and just reminding people of the larger vision of the organization and why it is you're suffering through that hour of whatever it is that you don't want to be doing. I think that helps keep people motivated. And I would go on to say that, when I receive praise about the success of the organization, I often say that my greatest accomplishment is in hiring great people. And I don't say that to deflect. I say that because one person can't do it all. And I am surrounded by extraordinary professionals who give it 110% every day. And each year when I reflect on my goals and what it is that I'm trying to accomplish for the organization that year, I always include one that focuses on employee retention and recruitment, because I really do believe it's all about the people. From things from ongoing professionalization of the workplace to increased benefits. That's a very large spectrum, but it really is such a priority for the organization to make sure you have great people.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Elise, this has been super fun, super insightful. I love the story of what you're building. I love experiencing it as a patron, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.